Good evening and welcome to Doctors on Call. I'm Mary Morehouse, psychotherapist at Insight Counseling, Duluth, where I specialize in working with children, teens, young adults, and parents. I'm your host for our program tonight on parenting. The success of this program is very dependent on you, the viewer, so please call in your questions tonight or send them in ahead of time to our email address at ask@pbsnorth.org. The telephone numbers can be found at the bottom of your screen. Our panelists this evening include Celeste Schnellenbach, Jacqueline Ingro, and Lindsay Sauko. Phone volunteers are standing by to answer your calls. And now, on tonight's program on parenting. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited about this topic. Everyone here is a parent, I believe. And so this is something that I hear about in my practice all the time. I'm working with young adults, parents. It's such a difficult thing for us to all navigate, and there's not a lot of formal training. I won't get on my soapbox to say I wish that there were parenting classes in high school so we could all learn this stuff. So, but let's just start with you, Celeste. Tell me a little bit about your practice, where you work, and what you specialize in.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. So I own Duluth Perinatal, which is a private therapy practice specializing in reproductive and perinatal mental health. So the full span of trying to become a parent or trying to conceive, being pregnant, postpartum, and then naturally everything that follows, which includes parenting.
Yes, it does. All right, Jacqueline, tell me a little bit about where you work and what you do.
Sure. I work at Northwood Children's Services. I'm the clinical director there, and we work with children as young as 2 years old up to 21 years old. And that's everything from outpatient programs where you maybe would go and have therapy once weekly to inpatient programs where the children live with us.
Okay, wonderful. And tell us a little bit about where you work.
I work for Fond du Lac Behavioral Health. At Fond du Lac Behavioral Health, my specialties include parenting and parent-child relationship therapy. I also work with couples and individuals there as well. And my age group of working with children is anywhere from birth to grown-up.
Yeah, birth to grown-ups, excellent. And so a lot of times when we talk about working with, about parenting and children, how important is it to work with the whole family and not just the children and not just the parents? How much of that do you see working with the children and the parents?
I used to see it more individualized. I used to see just children and similarly with little children, and quickly learned that they cannot be seen alone. Parents are vital.
Yes.
The whole family unit is vital. Those relationships matter.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Tell me a little bit about, Jacqueline, we were talking earlier about what it means to be a solid object for kids. Tell me a little bit about what you mean by that. I love that concept.
Well, the solid object is really something that children can learn to know that no matter what happens, they're going to be stable for that child. Their responses, their reactions, being dependable, that is the person they can count on to be not only physically present, but also emotionally able to take care of whatever that child needs.
Okay, and is that generally a parent, that solid object?
Yeah, usually it is a parent. Sometimes in several different, family systems look different, and that can be a grandparent.
Okay.
That can be a co-parent, or that could be a step-parent.
Okay.
But it's really making sure that no matter who's working with that child, when that child is really under distress and having a difficult time, that parent is able to be emotionally available, be able to kind of separate the issue and see things from kind of that wise mind perspective. Their child is in the emotional mind and they're not using any logic, so it's really up to the parent to be able to help navigate that with the child.
Yeah, and easier said than done.
Yes.
Right, so easier said than done. Lindsay, can you tell me a little bit about just some basic child development that we, that not a lot of people know about, and some of the normative behaviors around some child development, which I realize is a huge question, right? We could spend the next.
Let me sum up.
Yes.
So I think really what I think parents run into is that there's a lot of anxiety about parenting, and nobody gets a book that says do this and know this when you have a baby, and so sometimes adults will just apply their own sort of logic to things and are really thinking that maybe the child is thinking that same way, except they've had a lifetime to develop that thinking, and it doesn't work that way for children. And so when you're looking at an infant and what their needs are, 100% you have to be attuned to what their cries are and what their needs might be, and just trial and error, trial and error, trial and error. And as they get older, if you're paying attention, you start to realize what it is that they need. But when there's something that goes wrong, it's much harder to understand what it is that's going on with them. And so staying calm and watching and paying attention and co-regulating with the child in the toddler ages is really important to understand. And then as they start to get older and they get more savvy, it's real important to just understand that their brains are changing and working differently. And so when you're working with a toddler, the whole world is the toddler. There's nothing else. You can't expect them to really understand someone else's perspective or have empathy for another child that they just threw something at. That's normal learning cause and effect. And as they get older, they will understand things a little bit more and a little bit more. And I guess I can't sum all that up.
Yeah.
But understanding that children don't think like adults, and you have to kind of understand and watch them, pay attention, talk to them to understand where they are coming from and what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great point, because I think a lot of times parents say, well, why isn't this happening? Or trying to talk to the kid, trying to talk to at their level, but really not, trying to figure out that sweet spot of adult understanding of 30 or 20 or 30 or 40 years on this planet versus 7 or 8 or 10. Or why is my child lying? Well, that's kind of trying to figure out cause and effect. It's kind of, some of this development and some of this behavior is kind of, it's natural. And I think if we all look back on the way we were when we were kids, we all did things. How do we figure it out? Well, by usually messing up and then figuring out the consequences of that.
Right. And why did you, I've told you 5 times, and why are you still doing it? Because that's how they learn, is doing it over and over and over again.
And yeah, repetition is the key. Repetition is the key, which Celeste brings us to a little bit about talking about circle of security. And so that, I know I learned that in grad school, and I thought it was an amazing concept. So can you speak a little bit of what circle of security is?
Certainly, yeah. Very similar concepts to what's already been discussed, just different words. So it's the idea of that caregivers, parents, whomever's available for a child is this secure person. It's a literal circle where the parents are represented by this figure that is hands. And as children go out to explore their world and learn all sorts of things through play and creativity, that we can support them while they go out and then welcome them back in by filling their emotional needs, helping them regulate as long as we are regulated, so that's co-regulation. And it's really just this framework of how do parents and children work together, and really how does the parent then learn how to read what are their children's cues and the miscues. And it's just a really helpful kind of framework to understand when my kid is out exploring their world, they need me to play with them, to delight in, oh my gosh, you picked up the red truck, I love that. Or as they come back to you, wow, that was really so fun for you. Or, oh, you fell down and that hurt your knee. That does kind of hurt, that's an ouch. Just a way to interact with them that is child-friendly and all about that sense of secure attachment with caregivers who are bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind, who as often as they can will follow the child's need, not necessarily their lead, but then take charge whenever necessary.
Gotcha. And are there trainings for that in the area for parents?
For parents, certainly. I was thinking professionals.
Yes.
A lot of the local ECFE classes offer that.
Okay,
I'll do it with dyads or with small groups myself.
Okay.
I was trained in it a number of years ago, but yeah, ECFE is a local option for Minnesota families.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. And Jacqueline, if you could tell a little bit about, you meant to, when you were talking earlier about calming, what to be a solid object for kids, calming spaces in homes. And I think so when kids inevitably become big, dysregulated, kind of those, they're not in their wise mind. I love that you're using the DBT skills there. One of my favorites. So what does that look like? What does a calming space in your home look like?
Well, it can look really different based upon which child. And for some of us that have children, we've been like, wow, we have one child that regulates this way and one that does it a completely different way. And so it's really knowing what's going to work best. When your child is really upset, are they a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn type of child? So that calming space should be things that are going to help them feel like this is what helps me calm down. What helps my sister calm down is not going to help my brother calm down. So you maybe want a space that has a small spot to climb into and warm fuzzy things or lights that are nice and calm and relaxing. You may want a space that has things to jump on and move around with because there's extra energy that they need to get out. You might have a space that has different smells and different sounds that the child has control over because they just need control over something. So a calming space is really a space that you've dedicated when they're in a good spot and when they're in their wise mind that you discuss together of what do you think would help you when you're really escalated, really upset, and is going to help you calm down. And then you practice those when they're in a good spot so that then when they do get upset, they're much more comfortable using it, and it's not, I'm being told I have to use it. It's, nope, I was a part of making this decision, and this is my choice to use it.
This is my choice. And so you could have one spot, but different objects. If you have multiple children, you can have somebody wants books or somebody needs soothing lotions or something like that. So you can, and then do it. And I think that it's so important and so difficult, but so important to try and have these conversations with our kids, age appropriate, when everyone's in a good mood.
Yeah.
When we're playing and, yesterday when you hit your brother or your sister and that wasn't very nice, and having those conversations, to remember to have those conversations when things are going well.
And it doesn't have to be expensive, and it doesn't have to be
No.
large. It
No.
can be literally make a little blanket fort, and that's their blanket fort spot.
Yeah, boxes. As we all know, the holidays are coming, and my kids' favorite toys were the boxes, right? That was what I made a dollhouse out of boxes, and that was better than the dollhouse that was purchased. All right, we have a question, Lindsay. What's one thing you would recommend for parents to proactively take care of their own mental health? This is a question. Yeah, I know, right?
Well, and I think that's a perfect question because parents, if they don't take care of their own mental health, if they're spread too thin, they're getting stressed, their kids are picking up on that, and it can come out in their parenting. You end up having to make some last minute decisions about what to do about parenting. You're in the moment, and now you're like, if you don't do this, then I don't know, then you have to hurry up and think of like what's gonna happen if you don't do this in a certain amount of time. And so the best thing to do is to make sure that you have support system first, because and it's not easy for everybody. Some people don't have healthy family members or close friends. Maybe they're single parenting and they just don't have time. But the most important thing is to have people that you can rely on, that you can talk to, that you can open up to about, especially parenting stressors. It can make a big difference if you have another parent to talk to about this annoying behavior that you've been dealing with for months and months and months. And the other thing is to make space for your own time every single night. If you don't, even if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it just needs to be quiet, it needs to be your own time, and it needs to be a space for you to just be without children.
Yeah.
And if it gets to a point where it feels too overwhelming, then you ask for some support a little bit more professionally. You can get your own therapist, you can join a parenting group. Circles of Security is perfect for learning how to do your own self-care and take care of yourself. And I think what happens is parents get shamed a lot for doing bad parenting, and then they start to feel ashamed and they don't reach out because they feel like I'm just being a bad parent, and then it defeats the whole purpose of getting parents to do the right thing. And so if parents are feeling ashamed and they can find someone who doesn't make them feel ashamed, that's going to be a really good support person to reach out to. And again, having an individual therapist or a group you can join can make a big difference in even just learning parenting. That can take some of the weight off of decision making that you have to do.
Yeah, there are so many decisions with that, and just that taking that 5, 10, 15 minutes, that self-compassion piece, having a little bit of self-compassion for yourself, because the more we take care of ourselves, the better we can take care of others. And it seems selfless or selfish at the time, but it's the most selfless thing we can do is just take that extra 5 minutes or whatever it is. Take that. Yeah.
Right, and I think the hard part for parents is sometimes they feel if I'm going to be a good parent, I have to pour everything that I have into my children, and that's not always the best thing that you can do as a parent. And actually, what makes more sense is to show the children that you have living in your home that you value your own health. And that you take some time out to be with friends, and then they can see that, because then when they grow up, they'll know that it's important to have friends, to go visit a relative, to join therapy, to be in a group. And when they see that, they learn that it's okay and that it's important to take care of yourself, so that when it comes time, you can help take care of other people that really need it.
Yeah, so I think trying to become that good role model, even if you didn't have that role model, right? We all didn't have great role models growing up. Some of us did, some of us didn't. And so to be able to be the parent, and I think that is what we talked about earlier before, about learning or thinking about parenting before you even get pregnant. Can you speak to that?
Certainly, yeah. I really love those conversations when people are trying to conceive and they're visualizing what it'll be like to be a parent. A natural part of the conversation is, how are they parented? And because that informs so much of when we're stressed, we don't know what to do, I'll just refer to what my mom or dad did or whoever else took care of me, for better or worse. And so thinking about that, and throughout pregnancy too, throughout each trimester, and even the quote-unquote fourth trimester postpartum, I think of like the first trimester, when people are naturally protective of their bellies in crowded spaces. Like I try to expand parenting to include that as well. You're already protecting your baby. That attachment is already there. And moving into the other trimesters of like, what do you think of this baby? Who do you think they will be when they make their worldly debut? How can you prepare for birth? Like all of that is so related and commingled in the best ways and in the hard ways too.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Jacqueline, if we could, normalizing some behaviors and some teachable moments. Can you talk about just normalizing some behaviors of kids that seem really big in the moment, and you're like, yeah, that's what they do. I mentioned lying before. We mentioned hitting. Some of these things that as parents we go, oh, of course you never want your child to lie and to hit and to, but that's part of the normal. So can you normalize some behaviors that you see and go, oh yeah, that's right on schedule?
Yeah. I think the other one is manipulation.
Yes.
Negotiation. Those are all.
You're bringing me
fun
back.
ones that you're like, oh wow, you're catching on. They're getting a little smarter than you're anticipating. But I think it's really important for us to not look at everything and be like, oh no, that means my child is this, or that means my child is this. And really, we don't need to diagnose everything, because so much of the stomping up the stairs and getting upset, that's normal. The inability to get along with a sibling because you're just around each other all the time, and throwing each other under the bus about, actually this person broke this, no, this person broke this. So there's some of those things that are very normal. The sibling fights, or not wanting to be around you anymore and trying to find their own world with their friends. And kind of, you're like, ooh, that was a little snarky, that was a little snotty. Testing out the attitude sometimes is also something that they see on TV. They're emulating through older adults and older role models. And so it's really important for us to remember that those are teachable moments. To say, is that how you would like someone else to speak to you? Did that get you what you were hoping for? And actually turning it into a question, because a question becomes a conversation. Just simply saying, don't do that, there's no learning that takes place. And then there's no conversation, there's no growth. Because you're always trying to build that emotional awareness, the self-awareness when they're that young too. And they're always watching. I mean, that's something we can't forget. They watch what we do in the car when somebody cuts us off. How do we react as an adult to someone who steps in front of line in the grocery store? They're always watching. And so they'll learn and they'll emulate that from you.
Yeah, that's it. You know, that's scary as a parent to know that they're always watching, because we're not always at our best behavior. We're imperfect too. Parents aren't perfect, and I think that's from a parent's perspective and from a children's perspective. Parents aren't perfect. You're a parent. My parents aren't perfect. None of you. You know, I'm not a perfect parent, and so to kind of as a parent, give yourself a little bit of grace and go, wow, I didn't say what I wanted to say when that car cut me off. That was not my best moment. And to make that also a teachable moment. You know what? Mom didn't really act the way I should have, and that's okay too.
That's perfect, because we're asking them to do that, right?
Yes.
We're asking them to apologize
Yes.
and say when they did something wrong. So when the adult is doing that, that is just really reinforcing that for them.
Yeah.
And it feels good to repair. And that's another, not to get overly into circle of security, but
Yeah.
such a big thing about being a good enough parent is when we inherently make mistakes or do things we regret, that we acknowledge that, but then we repair with that child. Right?
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that, good enough parent. Because sometimes that's just at the end of the day when your head hits the pillow, you're like, well, that was a good enough day, and that's the best I can. You know what? That's the best I can do. Yeah. So roles clarification. So like just different roles of different parents. Do you feel like you can? Do you want some water? You good?
I think I'm better now.
Okay. Yeah. So different roles, and I think kind of along with that, you know, we were saying like the kids, you know, your kids everything until middle schoolish, starting into high school, and then they start to go away. So can you kind of speak of some of those transitions?
Well, I think transitions can be harder for parents than they are for kids because they have to adjust emotionally to those changes as well. And so the role of a child when they're a baby is for the parent to know and do everything. And as a toddler, it's for them to keep them safe and then let them go just a little bit further out on their own. And as a preschooler, just a little further. And even though kids will never like the boundaries when they're that age, it's really just so important for them to understand that this person is here to protect me and to keep me safe. And so even though you're saying, I'm just keeping you safe, and they don't know what that means, but they can feel it. They know my parent is not going to let me walk over the edge of that. I'm not going to get hurt when I'm around this parent. But letting go is really important when they start getting older, especially when they want to do their own things, and all of the bad things that could happen in the world are all of a sudden are in your head.
Yes.
And but when you think about your role as a parent, it's always to be someone who's safe to talk to, because even when they step out and you can't control all the things that are going on, especially in adolescence, you can't control what other kids are going to say and do, the way teachers behave, the way their friends are going to treat them, but they should be able to come back and say, listen, this is what's happening, and not have that fear of, which starts from infancy. If they fear their parent, it's going to be real tough for them to want to come and ask for help.
Yeah, and so it's finding that balance between authoritative but not authoritarian, right? Parenting to be that person that I can trust. And to teach your kids that it's okay to it's okay for you to not like everything that I say and I do. In fact, they shouldn't. Your parents, you should. As a parent, our kids shouldn't always like our decisions.
Right.
And that's expected. That's okay.
But
the love is there, but
but the love is there.
Yes,
and
but
they'll
the
know
love
that
is there. Yes.
if you're balancing that out with some real child-centered time.
Yes.
Because even if they're 14 years old and they barely ever want to spend time with you, knowing that that's an option and that your parent likes you and wants to be around you, even when we don't sometimes, if they think that will make them feel like, okay, even if I make mistakes, I'm still loved.
Great, thank you so much. I want to thank our panelists Celeste Schnellenbach, Jacqueline Ingroll, and Lindsay Sauko for joining me tonight, and the volunteers for answering your calls. Make sure to join Dr. Peter Nalen next week on Doctors on Call for our show about eye issues, cataracts, glaucoma, macular degeneration. Thank you for watching. Good night.